Kelsey Mitchell, 25 points, 9 for 15, 0 rebounds, 4 assists. Caitlin Clark, 21 points, 7 assists, missed 2 free throws back-to-back coming down the stretch. What was it, a 105-100 game? And if she made them both, it would have been a one-possession game. She missed them both. Now, I've never seen Caitlin Clark miss this many free throws in my entire time watching her throughout a full season. Throughout the time I was watching her at Iowa, through her rookie season, time she played last year.
That right there is the moment that makes this loss feel different. Caitlin Clark missing 2 free throws with the game still within reach is not something Indiana expects to see. But the bigger question is whether those misses were the problem or just the clearest symptom of something that has been going wrong with this Fever team.
You guys, today, I don't know what it is with this team. I don't know if they started getting high on their own supply. They started feeding into their own ego. Their sense of belonging as a top team got inflated. They started chasing after this 20-point streak too much to where it was prevalent in everybody's mind, and the offense doesn't seem to be clicking how it was clicking, I don't know, 3-4 weeks ago when we were going through those multiple.
Because listen to how quickly the conversation changes from one bad night to something much bigger. A few weeks ago, Indiana looked like a team finding its identity. The offense had rhythm, the confidence was growing, and those winning streaks made it feel like the Fever were finally becoming the team everybody expected them to become. Now suddenly, possessions look harder, the spacing looks less natural. Players who were operating with confidence look like they're thinking through everything, and that's what makes this interesting. You can blame missed shots, you can blame New York's pressure, you can blame individual performances. But later, we're going to get to the part that should concern Indiana more than any box score number, because there is one offensive pattern here that could become a serious problem once the playoffs start.
Is it the streak? The hunting of the streak? Is it the teams are guarding us differently? Is Stephanie White changing some rotations up? I will say, it seems like Caitlin Clark is getting taken out of these games a little bit earlier than usual when we were going through those streaks. Shoot, I saw her play some entire first quarters when we were going through those multiple game win streaks. I don't know the last time I saw Caitlin Clark play an entire first quarter.
Now we're getting somewhere. The rotation question matters because Caitlin's impact isn't just about how many total minutes she plays. It's about when those minutes happen and whether Indiana is allowing her to establish control of a game before changing the lineup. There's a difference between playing 35 minutes and controlling the rhythm for 35 minutes. When your lead guard starts reading the defense, finds a couple of passing windows, hits a shot, and begins forcing defenders to react to her, that's when the offense can start snowballing. Pull her during that stretch, and you're not simply resting one player. You're potentially interrupting the possession-to-possession pressure Indiana has spent the quarter building. That doesn't automatically make Stephanie White's rotation wrong. Coaches have to manage fatigue, matchups, and an entire season. But when the offense already looks disconnected, every substitution becomes more noticeable because Indiana doesn't have the luxury of immediately replacing Caitlin's creation with another player who bends a defense the same way. And New York knows that.
Because for the most part, Lexi Hull, we can't blame Lexi Hull because she hasn't really been contributing most of the season, right? So it's got to be somewhere between the big three or the coaching. I don't think teams are playing us that differently. Although the New York Liberty do give us more pressure than previous opponents, I think it's an internal issue, something with the team and the coaching staff, more than it is the opponents making us do things we don't want to do.
This is where I disagree with one part of that assessment. I don't think you can completely separate Indiana's internal problems from what opponents are doing to them. The Liberty's pressure matters. If a team can make Indiana uncomfortable bringing the ball up the floor, force the Fever into a different initiator, burn time before the offense even starts, and then deny Caitlin the easy return pass, that absolutely changes what Indiana is able to run. But here's the responsibility Indiana can't escape. This isn't a surprise anymore. New York didn't suddenly discover that Caitlin Clark is dangerous with the ball. Teams know Indiana wants to play through her. They know she can punish a defense before it gets organized. They know she'll throw the advance pass. They know she'll pull from deep, and they know that making somebody else initiate can take Indiana out of its preferred rhythm. So when Aaliyah Boston is bringing the ball up because the pressure has pushed Indiana into an adjustment, the important question isn't whether Boston is capable of doing it. She is. The question is what happens next. Are you immediately flowing into an action that puts Caitlin back at the center of the possession? Are you using Boston as the pressure release before creating a second advantage? Or did the defense successfully accomplish exactly what it wanted by turning Indiana into a completely different offense? That's the chess match Indiana has to solve before postseason basketball arrives.
The Indiana Fever played the New York Liberty today. Leone Fibish healthy. And back-to-back games, this team came out extremely flat. Team came out flat, didn't look like they were prepared. So I guess that is coaching. It's like they aren't familiar with the New York Liberty always playing us physically, always pushing, pressing us in the backcourt. So we just have Aaliyah Boston take up the ball. I don't know. Kelsey Mitchell can't take up the ball a few times. And when Aaliyah does take up the ball, it's not like we give it right back to Caitlin Clark to facilitate the offense. It's just it's a different offense. I don't know. I don't know where to assign. Everybody needs to take some culpability in how poorly this team has been playing.
And that's probably the fairest criticism in this entire discussion. Everybody owns part of this. The players came out flat. The coaching staff has to answer for preparation. The ball pressure created problems. The execution wasn't clean. But I wouldn't panic because Indiana lost 109-102 against New York. 7 points against a playoff-level opponent is not some catastrophic result by itself. I'd pay attention to how they lost. Indiana allowed New York to dictate too many stretches of the game. That's more important than simply saying the Fever lost back-to-back games. A championship-level team can lose. Every contender does. What you don't want is an opponent exposing something repeatable. Because once teams discover a repeatable way to make you uncomfortable, you're no longer dealing with one bad matchup. You're giving every future opponent film. Pressure Caitlin early, make somebody else initiate, be physical away from the ball, force Indiana deeper into the shot clock. Make the Fever execute in the half court, instead of letting them build momentum in transition. If that formula keeps producing ugly possessions, you can guarantee other coaching staffs are going to test it. And that brings us to the next uncomfortable part of this game. Indiana actually scored enough points to win plenty of nights. Their defense simply gave them almost no margin for error.
We allow 30 points in multiple quarters. We're not going to win like that. Now, I was told Stephanie White is a defensive guru. I was also told that we have this gentleman, Gary Kloppenberg, who was a former championship winning coach with the Seattle Storm. And he's helped bolster this defense as well. But when we allow multiple 30-point quarters, you're definitely not going to win.
That's the contradiction. Stephanie White has a reputation for emphasizing defense, and Gary Kloppenberg brings championship experience from Seattle. Yet Indiana gave up multiple 30-point quarters. At that point, your offense has to be nearly perfect. Think about what 109 points allowed does to the pressure on every offensive possession. A missed open three feels bigger. A turnover becomes devastating. 2 missed free throws late suddenly become the moment everybody remembers. That's why reducing this game to Caitlin's misses would be way too convenient. Indiana scored 102. If you need 110 to survive a playoff opponent, you're playing basketball with almost zero room for normal mistakes. And look at the matchup problem New York creates. Jonquel Jones can pull a traditional big away from the basket. Breanna Stewart can score from different areas. Leone Fibish gives them another weapon. Once your defense is being stretched across the floor, one late rotation creates another opening somewhere else. That's where the Fever have to decide what kind of defensive team they're actually going to be. Are they switching? Are they protecting the paint? Are they comfortable leaving Boston away from the rim? Who cleans up the glass when the bigs are pulled outside? Those aren't dramatic questions in August. They become brutal questions in a playoff series because the same opponent gets multiple games to attack the same weakness, and Indiana's personnel decisions in this game gave us a clue about one possible answer.
Michaela Timpson, 10 points, 6 rebounds, 18 minutes for Michaela Timpson. Michaela Timpson, she didn't see as much of the floor as she usually did. I think Stephanie White thought Maisha Hines-Allen was a better matchup, and Maisha Hines-Allen, she played well, so I'm not going to cry over spilt milk. However, I would have liked to have seen Timpson and Hines-Allen in there at the same time. Yes, Aaliyah Boston gives us height. Timpson gives us far much more because Aaliyah Boston's hanging out the three-point line, so her height is fairly useless if we're not going to have her around the rim. That's offensively.
Michaela Timpson is fascinating in this conversation because her value doesn't always show up through scoring. 10 points and 6 rebounds in 18 minutes is already useful production, but the bigger argument is stylistic. If Boston is being dragged toward the perimeter, Indiana loses some of the advantage that comes from having her size in the first place. That's not Boston doing something wrong just by standing outside. Spacing is part of modern offense, and matchups can pull centers away from the basket defensively, but Indiana has to understand the trade-off. If your biggest player is 20+ feet away from the rim, somebody else needs to provide rim pressure, rebounding, and physicality. That's where combinations become interesting. Could Timpson play beside Myisha Hines-Allen for stretches? Could Indiana use a more physical front court to survive certain New York lineups? Could they make the Liberty work harder around the basket instead of constantly reacting to New York spacing? Those are the experiments you want now, not after a playoff series starts. And this is why the rotation discussion shouldn't become bench Boston or play Timpson. That's way too simplistic. Boston had 22 points and 6 assists. You're not talking about removing a productive player. You're talking about finding lineup combinations that preserve what Boston gives you while covering the areas where a specific matchup can neutralize some of her physical advantages. That's coaching. And when a team has postseason expectations, those little lineup details become the difference between having an answer and simply hoping your stars score enough.
I'll take my chances all day, every day. Lexi Hull, 0 points, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. What did we expect? She was coming off of a career game the other night. What did we expect? Aaliyah Boston, 22 points, 6 assists, 3 rebounds. Very quiet 22 points. Very quiet 22 points for Aaliyah Boston. Sophie Cunningham, 10 points, 5 assists for Sophie Cunningham off the bench. She got booed during checked-in. Though when she made her threes, she got cheered, and then there was a silent point, and then she got booed. So the crowd was probably 50-50 in favor of Sophie Cunningham, not in favor of Sophie Cunningham. But what did I just say? The crowd was probably 65-35% Indiana Fever fans, yet still the boos were 50-50.
And then you get one of the strangest contrasts of the night. Lexi Hull goes from a career performance in the previous game to 0 points here. Sophie Cunningham comes off the bench, gets booed when she checks in, then gets cheered when she hits shots. That crowd reaction tells you how unusual the environment around Indiana has become. This team travels with attention. Fever fans show up. Caitlin Clark changes the atmosphere of a road building. Individual players can generate their own reactions on top of that. But none of that wins a possession. And that's an important distinction because this team has reached the stage where attention isn't enough anymore. Early in this era, Indiana could be judged by growth. Then they could be judged by whether they could compete with good teams. Once you start stacking winning streaks and talking seriously about playoff positioning, the standard changes again. Now people are asking whether this group can win when plan A doesn't work. Can somebody punish a defense for overplaying Caitlin? Can the bench hold a lead? Can the defense get 3 consecutive stops? Can Indiana execute when the crowd is loud, the whistle isn't perfect, and the game slows down? Those are playoff questions, and New York gave Indiana a playoff-style test without waiting for the postseason.
Mo Billings, 4 points for Mo Billings, 2 rebounds, 1 assist. Myisha Hines-Allen, 4 points for Myisha Hines-Allen, 7 rebounds. I think Myisha Hines-Allen played well. The stat sheet's not necessarily going to say it, but I liked her toughness. I liked her physicality. She was definitely giving Jonquil Jones some problems, forced a couple offensive fouls. So I liked how Myisha Hines-Allen played tonight. It's nice seeing her get some more minutes because it seemed like she was exiled for a little bit, but she is getting her minutes again.
This is one adjustment I actually think deserves more attention. Myisha Hines-Allen finished with only 4 points, but 7 rebounds, and physical defensive possessions can matter more than the scoring column suggests. Against a player like Jonquil Jones, you're not always looking for somebody to completely shut her down. Sometimes you're looking for a defender strong enough to make every catch uncomfortable, force her a step farther from her preferred spot, and create one extra difficult possession. That physicality has value, and if Hines-Allen can provide it consistently, suddenly Stephanie White has another tool. But Indiana's problem is that another tool has to become something they can trust. You don't want to reach the postseason still wondering which bench player can survive a particular matchup. The regular season is where those answers need to emerge, because stars get the headlines, but playoff games are often decided during the minutes when 1 or 2 stars sit. Which brings us to what may be the biggest roster problem exposed by this game. Not Caitlin's shooting, not Boston's positioning, depth.
But this Indiana Fever team needs to figure it out. They need to figure it out. Because the last 2 teams that we played, both playoff teams. Dallas Wings, Jessica Shepard has her way in the first half. Arike Ongobowale has her way in the second half. New York Liberty tonight. Brianna Stewart, 22 points. Leonie Febish, 20 points. Jonquel Jones, 19 points. But it was the bench. Their bench outshined our bench. Now, is that an excuse? It is, but we've been, at least over here, we've been saying that the whole entire season. There's not enough depth on this team. You look at our bench as far as scoring goes, and it's Sophie Cunningham. And then there's Sophie Cunningham. You can't even rely on Monique Billings to give you 7 to 10 points off the bench. You can't even rely on it. Monique Billings today gave us 4 points off the bench, and we're happier than a pig in shit because she's been so unplayable for us. Monique Billings needs to give us 7 to 9 points off the bench consistently. Consistently, with more than 2 rebounds.
There it is. This is where the entire conversation changes. New York got 22 from Breanna Stewart, 20 from Leonie Fibich, and 19 from Jonquel Jones. But the point being made here is about what happened beyond the headline names. Indiana needs reliable production after the starters. Sophie Cunningham can give them that spark, but one dependable bench scorer isn't enough if you're trying to survive a playoff rotation. Monique Billings gave Indiana 4 points in this game. The criticism isn't that 4 points automatically makes her performance terrible. It's that the Fever need to know what they're getting from those minutes. Consistency is currency in the postseason. A coach can plan around 6 predictable points, strong rebounding, and dependable defense more easily than a player who gives you 12 one night and almost nothing the next. And depth matters even more for this particular team because of the way opponents defend Caitlin. If you're going to trap, press, or deny one player aggressively, you're making a bet. You're betting that the other 4 players won't punish you enough to stop. The easiest way to destroy that strategy is not for Caitlin to fight through 2 defenders every possession. It's for everybody else to make the defense regret sending 2, hit the open 3, attack the 4-on-3, set a real screen, finish the layup after Caitlin creates the advantage. Turn the defense's obsession with number 22 into a weakness. That is where Indiana's supporting cast can change the geometry of the entire game. And it's also why missed potential assists matter. 7 assists looks good on a box score. But if teammates are missing quality looks created by Caitlin's passing, the number doesn't fully capture how many advantages were generated. The opposite is also true. Caitlin has to punish the opportunities she gets. Missing free throws late hurts. A superstar doesn't get exempted from criticism because the roster has other problems, but there's a massive difference between asking your star to play better and designing an offense where your star has to solve everything herself. Indiana has to avoid crossing that line. Because once playoff defenses load up, they're going to keep asking the same question until the Fever answer it. Who else are you willing to trust?
And subscribe to the channel, that would mean so much to me. Heading to the playoffs, is this it? The team knows that they're right about to make the playoffs. It's that close. They clinched last night with a loss from another team. And they said, we could take our foot off the gas. They saw themselves climbing in the standings. And over these last 2 games, they said, we could take our foot off the gas. Stephanie White said, okay, we got our playoff berth wrapped up. We're good here. Not sure what it is. A lot of questions still surrounding this team. What's their mental toughness like? It seems like we luck into these wins in these close games. It doesn't seem like we really out-muscle or out-grit a team. You just kind of, it either falls into our lap or Caitlin Clark hits a game-winning 3 against the Washington Wizards. It doesn't really seem like we outplay teams. It seems like our opponents.
And now we can talk about the mental side, because clinching a playoff spot changes the emotional landscape whether players admit it or not. The suggestion here is that maybe Indiana subconsciously took its foot off the gas. We can't know that from the outside, and it would be unfair to state it as fact, but the timing makes the question reasonable. You spend weeks chasing something, you're climbing the standings, every game feels urgent. Then the playoff berth becomes secure, and suddenly the psychological target moves. The best teams immediately replace that goal with another one. Seeding, home court advantage, building postseason habits, defensive consistency. Whatever it is, there has to be a new source of urgency. Because we made the playoffs is not enough if the real expectation has become, what can we do once we get there? And I don't completely agree with the idea that Indiana's close wins simply fell into their lap either. Winning close games is a skill. Having Caitlin Clark capable of hitting a game-winning three is not luck. Creating enough pressure for an opponent to crack is part of competition, but there is a warning hidden inside those wins. If your late-game formula constantly depends on extraordinary shot making, you're living dangerously. Great teams don't eliminate close games, they create more ways to win them. Sometimes the star hits the dagger, sometimes your defense gets the stop, sometimes Boston scores inside, sometimes Mitchell gets downhill, sometimes the bench gives you the possession that changes the night. Indiana needs more of those pathways available, because postseason opponents are going to take away the first option and dare you to reach for the second and third.
Something's going on over there, and maybe this FIBA break is going to be the best thing for this team to kind of recalibrate. We have a game tomorrow against the Chicago Sky, 4 days off, a game on Friday, and then we have the FIBA tournament break. So hopefully that break will give us time to recalibrate, regroup, and start down the home stretch of the season, gearing up for playoffs. Now, I don't want to jinx it and say maybe this team just peaked too early. Maybe during those 2 back-to-back win streaks in the middle of the season, maybe we just peaked too early. You guys let me know. But I'm really not seeing a lot of plays ran for Caitlin Clark. I'm not seeing many hard screens ran for Caitlin Clark. I'm really not seeing anything to get her open outside of iso ball.
And now we finally get to the part I teased earlier, because this is the offensive concern that matters more to me than one loss. Where are the actions specifically designed to make Caitlin Clark's life easier? That's the question. Not why doesn't Caitlin shoot every possession? Not why doesn't she play 40 minutes? And not why does anybody else touch the ball? Those arguments miss the point. The point is that if defenses are going to devote extraordinary attention to your most dangerous perimeter creator, your offense should weaponize that attention. Hard screens matter because they force decisions. Off-ball movement matters because Caitlin doesn't need to start every possession dribbling against a set defense. Re-screens matter. Ghost screens matter. Spain pick-and-roll concepts matter. Actions that make defenders communicate matter. Even using Caitlin as a decoy can matter if the defense is terrified enough of her movement to open something for Mitchell or Boston. But standing around and waiting for Caitlin to create in isolation is doing the defense a favor. That's the distinction. The solution isn't necessarily more Caitlin Clark possessions, it's better Caitlin Clark possessions. Get her the ball after the defense has already been forced to move. Make her defender chase. Use Boston's screening and passing. Use Mitchell's scoring gravity. If a defender top locks Caitlin to prevent her from coming off a screen, back cut it. If New York sends 2 defenders, short roll Boston and attack 4-on-3. If they pressure full court, use that aggression against them with early advance passes and secondary actions before the defense gets set. Every aggressive defensive strategy gives something up. The job of a great offense is to identify what that something is and attack it until the opponent changes. That's why these last 2 games can actually be valuable for Indiana if they treat them correctly. They've been given the scouting report opponents are likely to use. They don't have to guess. They can see where the pressure bothers them. They can see which lineups struggle. They can see what happens when Caitlin is denied the ball. They can see whether the bench can produce. They can see what happens when their bigs are pulled away from the basket. That's information. And now Stephanie White gets the part that really matters. Time to respond. The upcoming break could be huge, not because Indiana needs to reinvent itself, but because this team needs to sharpen what already made it dangerous. The Fever don't need 15 new plays. They need clarity. Who initiates against pressure? Where does Caitlin go after giving up the ball? Which screener creates the cleanest advantage? What frontcourt combination works when Boston is pulled outside? Who is the first scoring option off the bench? What defensive coverage do they trust when opponents stretch the floor? Those answers turn a talented roster into a playoff team. And there's another reason I'm not ready to say Indiana peaked too early. Teams don't develop in a straight line. Sometimes a winning streak hides problems because the result makes everybody feel good. A loss forces you to stare directly at the possessions you were getting away with. Maybe Indiana's earlier success made certain weaknesses easier to ignore. If that's what happened, getting exposed now is infinitely better than getting exposed in an elimination game. But there's a flip side. If the same problems are still showing up after the break, then this stops looking like a temporary slump and starts looking structural. That's the real test. Not whether Caitlin scores 30 in the next game. Not whether Indiana blows out a weaker opponent. Watch the process. Watch how easily they enter the offense. Watch what happens when Caitlin gets pressured. Watch whether somebody actually frees her with a hard screen. Watch Boston's positioning. Watch whether the bench can survive without the starters carrying every possession, and most importantly, watch the defense, because 102 points should give you a chance. Indiana can clean up the free throws, Caitlin can find her shooting rhythm, Hull can bounce back, Mitchell can keep scoring. Those are believable outcomes, but if you're giving playoff teams repeated 30-point quarters, none of those offensive improvements guarantee anything. That's why I don't think the Fever should be panicking. I think they should be uncomfortable. There's a difference. Panic makes you abandon what works. Discomfort makes you confront what isn't working. Indiana has enough talent to be dangerous. Caitlin can change a game in a few possessions. Mitchell can score with anybody. Boston gives them an interior hub who can score and facilitate. Cunningham brings edge and shooting. Timpson gives them another physical option. Hines Allen can give them toughness. The pieces are there. The question is whether those pieces are being organized into something that can survive when an opponent knows exactly what Indiana wants to do. Because that's what playoff basketball is. There are fewer secrets. The scouting gets deeper. The physicality increases. The same weakness gets attacked again and again until you prove you can stop it. And Indiana just got a preview. So now you have to choose. Are these last two performances simply the normal dip of a team that clinched its playoff spot and needs the upcoming break to reset? Or did New York expose a blueprint that could follow Indiana directly into the postseason? And if you're Stephanie White, what are you fixing first? The defense, the bench rotations, or the way this offense is creating opportunities for Caitlin Clark? Drop your choice in the comments, and if you want to follow how the Fever answer these questions heading toward the playoffs, like the video and subscribe.